Welcome to Dear Texas Radio, where we encourage Texans to drop everything and read. Your hostess for today's show is Roxanne Berkey.
Hi, I am Rox Berkey, and I'm delighted to have everyone here this evening on Dear Texas, where we do encourage everyone to drop everything and read Texas. Tonight, I have a really special guest, and I hope that you get a lot out of this. Love to have your feedback. I'm happy to welcome Kimberly Fish with us this evening. Kimberly, thanks for joining.
Oh, thank you, Rox. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
So, Kimberly, I think that it's really good, since you're a relatively new author, at least in the nonfiction or in the fictional world, that you kind of give a little background to our listeners about you.
Oh, I'm happy to do that. You know, writing is one of those things that doesn't just happen overnight, and I know you know that because of your own writing experience. It just takes years to kind of grow and foster, and I've had the privilege of being in the writing industry really since I graduated from college, and have always found myself working in either some sort of pre-production work in marketing, or even once I married and had kids, kind of taking on a freelance writing role where I was able to stay plugged in with my community and civic groups and special interest projects by contributing writing materials from everything from scripts to website materials to marketing materials that were needed for different projects. And through the course of that, I've learned tons of information that I may never need to use again, and then some really fascinating pieces of information that just called me back to explore a little bit more, and that's what led to this initiative that put me forward on writing The Big Inch.
The Big Inch. Now, there is a very, very interesting title. Now, I'm sure that has some specific meaning, and I really want you to share that.
Oh, I'm happy to, because it is a compelling phrase, and it certainly sticks in the brain. But I take no credit for it, because it was named years ago when welders and oilmen and pipeline fitters and politicians came together to do an amazing project that was really destined to save World War II. And that just sounds so huge to try to even present that as a pipeline project, until it's understood that during the 1940s, our country was in crisis, not only because of impending war and our engagement in the European theater with the Allies fighting against Hitler and the Axis, but in large part because our country was being crippled as well. We were a huge oil producer here in East Texas, and have been for the last 80 years. But the oil that was produced here in East Texas was needed in the northeastern part of our nation. And so every time oil tankers would leave from the Houston shipping channel to try to get that oil to the northeastern coast, the submarines, the German U-boats, were sitting in the Gulf of Mexico, and they're just sort of sinking those tankers in almost like a game. And consequently, not only were our citizens being crippled, but the troops that were fighting in Europe also had limited resources for oil. So it's kind of becoming a critical scenario, and Roosevelt recognized this years before Pearl Harbor, and had assembled an unlikely cast of characters to come up with a solution to this problem. And their crazy big idea was an above-ground pipeline that was going to originate in East Texas and go all the way to New Jersey, and it was 24 inches around in circumference and an inch thick in steel. Totally new technology for its day. And they're the ones that coined the phrase, the big inch, for that inch density of steel, and it's stuck. And people from all over Texas, all the way to New Jersey that worked on this project, they all called it the Big Inch. And so when I was doing the research for this project, that just naturally gravitated to the top when I was looking for a compelling title.
There you go. And when we chatted about this, and I got a little of the background, I know that initially when you did the research on this particular project, you really hadn't thought of creating a novel. So what was the original compelling event to even do that research, Kim?
Well, it grew out of community engagement. I come from a family that has traveled all over thanks to the military and being moved in a variety of locations. And when my husband and I moved to Longview, we settled into this community and started getting engaged. And I was involved in several community endeavors, and I recognized that there was a lack of ability to articulate what was significant about Longview. I mean, other than it's just a beautiful place in the state of Texas, and it's easily located between Dallas and Shreveport. People just had a hard time defining what it was that made this community distinct and unique. And through the course of research that I would do for various writing projects, I would end up many times in the archives of the library or in our Gregg County Historical Museum, and I kept coming across this World War II project. And I'd ask about it, and inevitably people I would talk to didn't either know of the Big Inch Pipeline project, or they certainly didn't appreciate what the significance was. And as I put together the pieces of this pipeline project and realized the who, what, when, and why of it being located in Longview, I realized that was that compelling story. That was the thing that if I could articulate it in a way that was both entertaining and history riddled, that people would have a nugget that they could tell others when they're talking about Longview, or they're thinking about the future, or they're wanting to promote this community. They could say, hey, did you know that we helped save World War II from Longview, Texas? And that's a game changer.
No,
so
absolutely.
That was my motivation, to tell a story. Originally, I was just really thinking locally. How could I convince the people of Longview that they had a compelling reason to reinvest and share something significant going forward? And the theme of this book is very much about unlikely characters putting down their swords and doing something good for the greater good. And I just felt like that theme, that idea was so relevant in today's culture as well, that this could be a good story to tell.
Well, I think that's really true, especially when you get the rich history from this country and how we contribute to different efforts to keep this country strong and free. And I think what's very interesting in this rich historical novel that you've created is that you really start out with this very interesting heroine, Lane Mercer. Can you share a little bit about Lane with our audience?
Oh, Lane grew out of an interesting bit of research. So I'll tell you that when I was pulling together an angle on this story that was refreshing and new and different. And in this course of history that I enjoyed researching, I discovered that Churchill and Roosevelt frequently put their heads together to problem solve and anticipate how they were going to handle different circumstances. And even, again, before American engagement in World War II, those two world leaders had realized that they were facing a new enemy. And these were far different battle strategies than had existed in previous international engagements. And espionage was going to be a part of the war effort. And neither country had an established espionage network. As a matter of fact, it was rather an anathema to American political leaders to even consider such a thing, because it was counter culture to the American ideals of honesty, integrity, and truthfulness, and so forth. But it was needed to fight an unconventional enemy. And unfortunately, many of the people that they needed to hire for this process were otherwise engaged in battle. So they decided to recruit women, in many cases, to act as the liaison, the spy, the connector between missions to help move intelligence networks along, because women were invisible, really, in war scenarios. And most people took women for granted when it came to matters of war. And so knowing that segment of history, I easily identified with what it might feel like if a woman who had been previously untrained in war, in espionage techniques, had volunteered for such a thing and then faced catastrophes. Because let's be honest, when you're inventing things as you go along, you have more mistakes than successes. And I believe that was, in fact, the case with the Office of Strategic Services, which is what they had named this fledgling agency. So I felt like having a character who was recovering from some botched mission in France, being relocated to the counter-opposite culture in East Texas, would be not only a refreshing opportunity to write about character struggles, but it would be a huge fish-out-of-water perspective on life in East Texas, and life in the middle of America, dealing with a war. And that was, those are new territories, because so many times we talk about what the home front was like in your battle zones, but we rarely discuss what the home front was like in the middle of our country. And this was an opportunity to shine a light on that.
And I think that is a perfect place for us to take just a short pause, Kimberly, and hear from our sponsors. And when we come back, I want to explore a little bit more about what you've done with Lane Mercer in this story.
Dear Texas would like to thank our sponsors. McKinney, Texas has a rich history, one it embraces and loves to share with visitors. Nowhere is this more evident than McKinney's historic downtown, with more than 100 eclectic shops and eateries to explore. Situated just 30 miles north of Dallas, McKinney offers the perfect getaway from the urban hustle. For more about McKinney, check out www.visitmckinney.com or call 888-649-8499. The third annual short story contest begins March 1st and runs through July 31st. Enter your short story for a chance at prizes and getting published. To learn more about this annual event, please visit our website at txshorts.com. Dear Texas would like to invite you to the McKinney Square Book Festival on June 3rd, 2017. The event will be held at the Performing Arts Center from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Meet 40-plus Texas authors, many of whom have won awards. Special events will take place during the day, and a special musical guest, Billy Dawson, will perform at 2 p.m. For more information, please visit our website, mckinney.deartexas.info. Wimberley Valley Tourism welcomes people to explore the many fine shops, restaurants, and wineries that make Wimberley special. More at wvtla.com. From concept to casting, recording to post-production, Spoke Media is dedicated to creating a superlative listener experience. www.spokemedia.io. EBG 247, where you can find ebooks galore 24 hours, 7 days a week at ebg247.com. Welcome to Dear Texas Radio, where we encourage Texans to drop everything and read. Your hostess for today's show is Roxanne Berkey.
And welcome back. I am Rox Berkey, and I'm having this delightful conversation with a relatively new author, Kimberly Fish, and we're talking about her historical book, The Big Inch. And Kimberly, when we paused for our short break, we were just getting into Lane Mercer, which is kind of the heroine of your story, and how she was part of a fledgling federal agency, Office of Strategic Services, and how did you position her in this story?
Well, she has a very unlikely role, and that is she, as part of her covert assignment with the OSS, is assigned to protect the man who's in charge of building this pipeline project. The codicil to that is he doesn't know. And she arrives in Longview emotionally drained from some circumstances that happened in France related to a rogue agent and a botched mission. And she has to pull herself together to do this interior job in the middle of America in East Texas. And she's both crippled by guilt and yet angry that she's been removed from the front lines to what she perceives to be a boring little community. What she doesn't realize is that Longview is a hotbed of intrigue in its own right, unrelated to the pipeline project, because Longview's history is fraught with controversy from its earliest days, from criminal activity and gambling and prostitution and drug running and gun running and booze and racial issues and very much a church crowd that wants to take control of a community and fight those tendencies that are so intrinsic in this area. And so she arrives to a community 180 degrees different from what she expected. And not only does she navigate that community, which has a relative of hers in the mix, but she has to maintain this secret role protecting the pipeline project, all the while assuming the identity of an executive secretary. And all three of those roles are new to her because she's used to doing resistance work in France and working, in whatever role is necessary to protect that particular mission. And here she is doing an executive secretary role, which is something she has no training for. So she is facing innumerable challenges as she begins this operation. And from the moment she arrives, things go in unexpected directions for her. And she's faced with not only confronting her own ghosts, but discovering what skills she has and aptitude she has that do, in fact, qualify her to do this job and to do it in a way that surprises even herself.
Wow, there you go. You're an outsider coming into Texas at that point in time. It would be a challenge for anyone. So was there anyone from your research or from your own life that you patterned Lane after?
I've had so many people ask me this question, and I can only say it was just an organic imagination experience that created her. She's certainly not autobiographical or biographical on anyone I know, but I identified with so many of those interior struggles that she had related to, shame, guilt, unqualified, put in circumstances that you don't feel trained to do, and then there's a level of expectation for you just to do it. And when I put my hat of history on my head and realized that not only was I writing very real female struggles into this character, but I also had to be authentic to the age. It wasn't fair to write a very modern woman living in 1940s. I had to write about a 1940s woman discovering her own identity and strength. And so that was an altogether different experience for me when I was crafting this character, and one that presented some significant challenges because in writing 1940s Longview, I had to address racial disparity issues that were very much genuine to the era, but not the era that we would love to sanitize and say, didn't exist. It needed to be real and gritty. And she needed to navigate through all that and discover value in the people that she was networking with, and yet use those skills that she had brought forward from her time in France and what it was like to be someone that was invisible, and apply it to these new circumstances that she found herself in. And she she gets caught up in dramas that were very real. Motivates you to carry on.
There you go. I mean, it sounds like that creating this character and putting as much realism into her as possible was as much of a challenge in creating this novel as doing the research to make sure that you had the accuracy of this entire project.
Well, Rox, one of the biggest challenges for me was being true to Longview, because this was really only a few generations removed from our current time frame, and I know the grandchildren and the children of the people who were active in Longview during those pivotal years, and so I needed to recreate the downtown and the restaurants and the parks and the activities of the home front in Longview, so that I could give honor to the people who'd gone before and yet feel realistic to the people who knew it for what it had been. Because Longview today looks different from Longview in the 1940s, and it functions a little bit differently. It's grown exponentially since that time. Mm-hmm. And so not only was I wanting to describe a vitality that existed for this war effort, but I needed to be true to the people that would remember it. And believe me, there was a challenge. I had to draw maps and find old names of stores and figure out how people would have moved from point A to point B. And I'm thankful that I spent as much time as I did in the details, because that's what so many people in Longview have come back to me to say that they find so much pleasure in. It's like they stepped back to very active memories that they had, and it gave them pleasure, and then of course that gives me pleasure.
Well, and that is exciting, and I'm sure the community is really opening their arms to you and applauding these efforts. And we don't want to give too much of this story away to folks, and we probably could spend 3 hours, and we don't have 3 hours to do that either. But I think it's an exciting read that people should seriously consider taking a look at. I know it's available on Texas Authors website. Where else is this book available for folks to grab, Kimberly?
Well, it's on Amazon, and it is there's a Kindle version as well. And then I'm really supporting my local shops here in Longview. So there's various places here, Barron's and Lewis Morgan and Pack and Mail, and various fun places that people hit on a regular basis where it's available in Longview. And I'm looking forward to finding more local outlets as I carry on across the state, because the historical museums have really embraced this book, because it speaks to a broader Texas initiative that stepped up to the war effort. And I'm happy to further that knowledge and that information about the amazing things that Texas did in support of our country during a time of crisis.
And that speaks an awful lot to your work on this story. Now, I think that it's also fair to say that I think you're working on something else that complements this story. Is that a fair statement, Kimberly?
It's a fair statement, Rox. I'll be honest, there were two significant World War II projects in Longview, Texas. And, I mean, it was just amazing that we got one, but that we got a second as well during those critical years was a real feather, I think.
Beginnings in Texas, The Big Inch by Kimberly Fish would be a really good read. Where are you going to appear or be available for people that may want to come out and meet with you? Do you have any appearances? Are you going to any of the book festivals that are coming up?
I have applied to attend several of the book festivals. I hope to make the Wimberley event in June. And then I'm also connecting with some of the energy summits that are going on in Texas right now. At the conclusion of the legislative session, several of those involved with the Railroad Commission and various energy suppliers are looking to kind of shine a positive light on some of those.
I was 20 once, way back when. I had a 70 Chevy and a few girlfriends. Had an older brother who looked like me. That's how I got my fake ID. Yeah, we had beer and rock and roll. Cigarettes weren't all they smoked. Them gravel pits outside of town, where we skinny dipped down, threw around our attitudes. Son, it didn't start with you. Hey, I was 21's too.
Where I put together photographs that are related to that time period of the 1940s. For those savoring what America was like during that time period, my participation is really good, and I include.
About you, I know our listeners have too, and I want to thank you very much for joining us this evening. Look forward to
Dear Texas, we'd like to thank our sponsors. Choose Raw Media Consulting, a book publishing consultant with creative inspiration in your life. More at chooseramedia.com. I'm Alex Anthony, your announcer. For all inquiries regarding voiceover, narration, and voice as heard on this program, please don't contact me at rockfluxstudio@gmail.com. Or you can call 512-537-6077. Thank you for listening and for your support. Thank you for listening to Dear Texas Radio. To learn more about Dear Texas and its literacy programs, please visit their website at deartexas.info. I am Alex Anthony, your announcer. Have a great day.